Hi, this is Sarah Dean, and today we're covering body regions. And like a lot in anatomy and physiology, you just have to memorize a list of body regions and figure out where they go on a diagram. So there's only so much I can do to help you with that aside from bring up a diagram and label all the body regions. One thing I would like to do is to show you how to find your own unlabeled diagrams that you can use to quiz yourselves. So before we get started going through a diagram of body regions, I'm going to show you how to find your own. And this will be helpful throughout your anatomy and physiology class because you can find unlabeled diagrams online for anything. You can find unlabeled heart diagrams, unlabeled kidney diagrams, unlabeled skeletal diagrams, whatever it is you want. And those are really important for studying in anatomy and physiology because you've got a textbook and it's got labeled diagrams, and those are great for learning it the first time. The problem is when you're studying and really trying to make those terms stick, reading and rereading that diagram doesn't really help. You may spend hours, you may work really hard, but passively reading and rereading something just doesn't make things stick. It's actually shown experimentally. There's research on this. What you have to do to make something stick is study actively, which basically means quizzing yourself. So online there's all of these diagrams, and all you have to do is do a Google image search for unlabeled blank diagram, or whatever it is that you want. So I'll just show you. Here's Google. Along the top of Google, there's these options like you can search the store. I mean, if you have like a larger view, you can search news, you can search all, you can search videos. We're going to search images. And I'm just going to type in the search term, unlabeled body region diagram. There you go. There's a whole bunch of unlabeled body region diagrams. You have men, you have women, you have posterior and anterior views. And some of them are very detailed, and some of them are not so detailed. And so depending on your class and your needs, you can find what you're looking for. Now, I'm going to use one of these unlabeled diagrams and go through it to give you a list of body regions. It's not going to be an exhaustive list. I'm not going to show you all the body regions there are. It's just a list of body regions that I think are pretty important to know. So the only issue with using these diagrams is that, some of the blanks I'm not going to use. And I'll also have to add some blanks where none existed because I'm not using a diagram specially made for my class for this video. I'm pulling one from the internet and filling it in and just showing you how you can do the same to study for your class. So let's get to my whiteboard. Oops, that's the posterior view. We'll get to that later. The first two terms I want to start with is the Appendicular Region and the Axial Region. Shown here is Appendicular Skeleton and Axial Skeleton. So Appendicular is referencing in the skeleton on the left, the regions highlighted in red. Axial for the skeleton on the right, also the region in red. Appendicular refers to the appendages. So appendages. So the appendicular region refers to the appendage region. Your appendages are your arms and legs. And the appendicular region includes the scapula in the shoulders, which attaches the arm appendages to the axis of the body. And it also includes the pelvic bone, the pelvic region, which attaches the leg appendages to the axis of the body. All right, and then, of course, all the parts of the arms and legs. The axial region refers to the axis of the body. So to remind you what an axis is, if you have a planet, for example, so this is, we'll say Earth. The planets, like the Earth, spin on their axis. So the axis is, in this case, an imaginary line through the middle of the planet, and the planet spins around that central pole, that imaginary pole or line. So that imaginary line is the axis. Another word that might help you remember the axial skeleton and what that references is, the axle. So a wheel spins around the axle, the earth spins around its axis. It's the center line around which everything else happens. So you can see the axial skeleton, it's the head, the vertebrae, the ribs, it's that central axis around which the appendages do their thing. All right, so those are the first two terms that I wanted to show you. Let me get to black. All right, so here's another, let me get my list here. So like I said, this is not going to be an exhaustive list. This is just a good list. So cephalic region, let's start with that. The cephalic region refers to the head. And there's a couple ways you can remember this. Cephalic comes up in biology a lot. I like to remember it with cephalopods because my 7-year-old son loves cephalopods. It's one of his favorite animals. If you don't know what a cephalopod is, it's those soft body animals with a lot of tentacles. And I will show you an example because I have one up here. There's a cuttlefish. It's a cephalopod. So cephalopod means a cephalic. Cephalic means head. And pod or podia refers to feet. So it means head foot. these squids, octopuses, cuttlefish, these are head foots. And maybe they're called that because they look like just a big head attached to a bunch of feet, right? Tentacles or feet. You can also think of them as head feet in that their tentacles have like a large proportion of their nervous system is actually in their tentacles. So in a way, their tentacles kind of have minds of their own. They can continue moving around and working even after they're cut off from the body. And so in that way, you can also kind of call them head feet, I suppose. So cephalopods, that's one way I remember cephalic. Another way is cephalization. So cephalization is the development of a front end, like the head end, and a tail end. So when you start out as like a little ball of cells in your mother's uterus, there's no front or back end really. But then as the fetus develops, it goes through cephalization, which is the development of the head. So animals go through cephalization developmentally, and they also, species go through cephalization over time. So animals started out without having a front and back end. There's no head and tail end, no front or back. So think about a sponge. A sponge is a very primitive kind of animal. It doesn't have any front or back or side to side. There's no directionality, right? So primitive animals were more like that. And then over time, cephalization happened, which means the nervous system was sort of like, grouped up near the front end of an animal. So then there was a front and back and a left and right. And so like worms are cephalized. They don't have a brain, but they have a front and back end. So cephalization was really an important step in evolution because it gave animals directionality so that they could move with purpose and direction, control their movement better. And it also was an important precursor to the development of a brain. So you had to have cephalization before you had a brain developed. And of course, all higher animals have brains. Mammals have brains, reptiles, amphibians, fish have brains. Cephalic comes up a lot in biology. And by the way, I don't need you to know all of that detail. I'm just giving you stories to go behind the terms because I think it helps them stick a little bit better if you have a story that goes with it. So cephalic is head. Let's see, frontal region is next. Your frontal region is your forehead. And then we have orbital region. That's your eyes. Your eyes are your orbits. The way I remember that is, eyes are spheres like planets, and planets orbit around the sun, right? Or the moon is also a sphere, also orbits around the earth. So that's how I remember that your eyes are your orbital region. Let's see, how about buccal? Your buccal region is your cheeks. Oral, that's easy, right? Oral. It's your mouth. So oral region is your mouth. Nasal. Nasal region is your nose. that's also intuitive, right? Because we talk about that in everyday speech. So cephalic is your whole head, and then we can break that down into frontal, orbital, nasal, buccal. They say oral. Oh, mental. This one is not intuitive at all, right? The mental region, because when we say mental health, we're talking about your brain. We're talking about the health of your thoughts. But the mental region is actually your chin. And I don't have any good way to remember that. You just have to start associating the word mental with jaw. I'm not sure what that connection is, but your mental region is your chin. All right. So away from the head now. Cervical. This one also is not immediately intuitive, but I can make it a little more intuitive. So cervical region is your neck. And that's confusing, right? Because cervical cancer is in the cervix, which is not your neck. That's part of the vagina. So half the population has a cervix. Everybody has a cervical region, though. So the cervix, you can think of that as the neck of the vagina. So that's how it's positioned. So the cervix is the neck of the vagina, and the cervical region is just your neck. So they're both necks in a way. They're both cervical regions in a way. But your neck is the cervical region, and the cervix is sort of like a neck region of the vagina, so that's a little bit different. All right, so cervical region is the neck. Axillary. Axillary region. That's your armpits. And I remember this, but I remember that the axillary region is right next to the axial region. So your axial region is your core, right? The central axis. And the axillary region is the most immediate thing to the axial region. All right, brachial. So your brachial region is your upper arm, and then I'm going to skip 8 for now and go to the antebrachial region. Antebrachial. That's your forearm. The anti means front, like in front of or preceding. So brachial region, and then in front of that is your forearm or your antebrachial region. So that's the term ante. And it's going to come up again. So then we have the antecubital region. Antecubital region. The antecubital region is the front of your elbow, which means, so that has ante again, which means front. So that might allow you to guess that the cubital region is just your elbow. So cubital, antecubital, brachial, antebrachial. Okay. And then we have the carpal region for wrist. Carpal region. So I think of carpal tunnel syndrome. Carpal tunnel syndrome is something that people who use their fingers a lot get. So I'll again back this term with a story. In high school, I had a friend who she was just a phenomenal musician, and it was her dream to play in an orchestra. And she got into a very competitive music program for college, and she knew how to play all kinds of instruments, flute, piano, but what she really wanted to focus on was the harp. And the harp, you have to really use your fingers to use the harp. And she practiced, more than 8 hours a day. All day long she was practicing. And eventually, she developed carpal tunnel syndrome, and it got so bad that she had to switch careers, and she went into nursing. She had to give up her dream of being a musician. She had to she couldn't, it was very hard on her mentally. She threw away her music, she threw away her instruments, all because she developed carpal tunnel syndrome. What carpal tunnel syndrome is a pinched nerve in your wrist, in the carpal region, from overuse. So overuse maybe creates inflammation, creates this compression on the nerves. And that creates a lot of pain in the hands. It makes the hand very difficult to use. And again, it's an affliction of overuse. So people who really use their fingers and their hands a lot, this nerve can become pinched, develop pressure on it. So that's carpal tunnel syndrome. Now, there's also, this is supposed to be cubital, not cubital. There's also a cubital tunnel syndrome. And again, that's from overuse of the elbow. So the cubital region is the elbow. Cubital tunnel syndrome is from overuse of the elbow. It's a pinched nerve, and it feels like your funny bone was hit, but it never goes away. So that's a pretty horrible affliction, right? Nobody likes to have their funny bone hit. And it's because the nerve got pinched in the elbow, and so you get this tingling pain in your hands and fingers all the time that makes it hard to use them. So cubital tunnel syndrome, carpal tunnel syndrome, so for cubital and carpal region, brachial region, antebrachial region, cubital region, antecubital region. Let's move to the hands. So we have the palmar region. That's easy because I got the right line, yep. That's the palms. And then the whole hands together is the manual region. That's easy. If you know Spanish, I live in Albuquerque, everybody knows Spanish, right? At least a little bit. Mano is hand, so that's like that helps remember the manual region. But also when you do something manually, you do it with your hands. So that's easy to remember. Palmar is easy to remember. Manual is easy to remember. Digits. Digits are on the hands, and they're also on the feet. That's also easy to remember. So the digital region, there's digital 1, and also digital 2 for the toes. Toes are also digits. Yes. Digital for fingers, digital for toes. Okay. Now, even though you can count on your fingers and you can count on your toes, that's why they're digits. But the big thumbs and the big toes have different names. So the big thumb is pollex, and the big toe is hallux. There is a story to help remember the thumbs, because Pollux is a character in Greek mythology. So in Greek mythology, there were these twins. And even though they were twins, they had different fathers, but the same mother. Their mother was queen of the Spartans. One of the twins had a mortal father, and so that twin was mortal. The other twin, Pollux, his father was Zeus, the god of, the king of the gods. And so Pollux was immortal. So one day Pollux goes to his father Zeus and begs to share his immortality with his twin brother because they get along really well and they love each other, and Pollux doesn't want his brother to die and to live on without him. He wants to be with his brother forever. So Zeus agrees, and so Zeus makes the two twins into the constellation Gemini to live in the sky for eternity. And so the constellation Gemini, which is also a zodiac sign, if you're into that kind of thing, one of those two brothers, the immortal one, the one who was originally immortal, his name was Pollux. So you can think of your thumbs as twins, and the immortal one is the one that gave the name to your thumbs, Pollux. All right. Hallux doesn't have a great story around it for the big toes. It's an abomination of Latin word alex for big toe. All right, so moving on from hands, let's go to the inguinal region. Inguinal. So that's right there. That's the inguinal region. Colloquially, we call that your loins. All right, 15. We're going to skip 15. Femoral region for 16. Femoral. All right, the femoral region, upper leg. That's intuitive if you know that the bone there is called the femur. So the region where your giant leg bone is, your giant femur is, that's the femoral region. All right, 17, patellar. Patellar region. Your kneecap is your patella, and so the knee is called the patellar region. Well, anyway, the anterior side of the knee. The posterior side of the knee has a different name. All right, let's see. Let's go back up again let's go to sternal. Sternal region. This bone that connects your ribs, that's called your sternum. And so this region is called your sternal region. And since we're in the area, let's do thoracic. Some of you may be familiar with the term thorax, but if you're not, and so this term is not intuitive, I'll try to make it a little more intuitive. I can always remember thorax because when I was a kid, I was still a nerd then, and I used to listen to cassette tapes before bed, and one of these cassette tapes had all these songs, biology and natural science songs in it for kids. And I still remember to this day there's a song that about the body plan for insects. And it was like head, thorax, abdomen. And I've looked and looked to try to play that song for you or give you the link. And I don't think it exists anymore. You can find the song head, thorax, abdomen to the melody of head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Head, thorax, abdomen, abdomen, head, thorax, abdomen, abdomen. Right. So anyway, maybe if you don't know thorax, if you listen to that, a song on YouTube, head, thorax, abdomen, that might help you remember. So here's an ant. So just head. The cephalic region. See, this body plan has been around for a very long time. Ever since arthropods or bugs were around. Head, thorax, abdomen. We also have an abdomen. It's where the uterus, the bladder, all those little organs down there, colon is. But our thoracic region is up here. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to change I'm going to change this line because I don't want to do that region. I want to do this region. That's the belly button, also known as let's see, yes, umbilicus. This is the term you have to know. Umbilicus. So that's for the umbilical cord, right? So your belly button is a scar from when you were connected to your mother in utero by the umbilical cord. The mother fed you nutrients and oxygen through your belly button. And then when you were born, all those blood vessels in the umbilical cord just scrunched up and, it either fell off or was cut off. And you were left with this belly button scar. And we call that the umbilicus. What else? Oh, pubic. Let's see. Pelvic first. Okay, pelvic. Your pelvic region. That's, behind your pelvic region. There's, for those of you who are women, you have a uterus there, but also the bladder is there. And then, of course, the pubic region. Everybody knows where that is. That's where your pubic hair is. Well, it's around there anyway. All right, what else? Tarsal region. Yes, let's do that. Tarsal. Tarsal region is your ankle. So carpal is to the hand as tarsal is to the foot. Pedal. That's your whole foot. Hallux, digits, and all. Okay. And it looks like pedal. Like pedaling on a bike, which you do with your feet. So the pedal region is what you pedal with. And there's one more foot thing I want to put in here, which is plantar region. The plantar region is the whole sole of the foot, the whole sole. But for me, it's easy to remember to think about flamenco. If you know anything about flamenco, you know that they stomp and make rhythms with their feet, almost like tap dancing in a way. And there's different kinds of stomping that you can do. Well, one kind is called a planta. A planta. That's where you stomp the balls of your feet on the ground really hard to make a loud stomping sound. So that's called a planta. That helps me remember plantar. Now, the plantar isn't just the balls of your feet, it's the whole sole of your foot. But still, I think, for me, it helps remember it. Let's see. Oh, yes. One last one. Again, I'm going to change the lines here. Instead of doing that, I'm going to do, well, kind of behind it, like right there. Right there. The lateral or outside of the lower leg. There's two words for this. So we can call it the peroneal region, or we can call it the fibular region. And it's named from muscles that you find in that region, which you'll learn in later videos. So the one thing I need to point out here is that the spelling is important, and you'll see why when we get to the posterior side of the body. The perineal region is very different from the peroneal region. So that O here is essential because the perineal is something else, as you will soon see. All right, so that's all I'm going to cover for the anterior body regions. Let's go to the posterior body regions. I'm just going to do a few of these. I'm not going to do all of them, but let's see. Which ones is it going to cover? Oh, yes, occipital. Oops. Occipital. That's the base of the skull, so the lower part of the skull in the back. Vertebral. Vertebrae, that's your backbone. Vertebral region is around the backbone. Scapular is where your shoulder blades are, your angel wings. That's the scapular region. Let's see. Let's do lumbar. So you have 3 different kinds of vertebrae. At the top, you have cervical vertebrae. In the midline, you have thoracic vertebrae. So cervical, neck vertebrae, thoracic, or like chest region vertebrae. And then your lower back has lumbar vertebrae. So that's sort of like when you're my age and you're sitting all day at a computer like this, you get pains in your lower back. That's in your lumbar region. Then we have, let's see, sacral region. If you're into chakras, that'll be easy to remember, right? The sacral region, sacral chakra is for sexuality or something like that. I know chakras because my first job was in a health food store. Okay, gluteal region. Gluteal region. Your butt muscles, right? Your glutes. Perineal region. Remember the peroneal region was on the lateral lower leg, right? The side of your lower leg. The perineal region is that small little bit of skin between your anus and your genitals. Very different. The spelling matters. So the perineum, that small bit of skin, it can tear during childbirth. And that's, like, it's talked about a lot in birthing circles, right? Because you can try to reduce the probability of a tear, holistic birthing, massage it, soften it with oils to try to prevent a tear, go slow. And really, almost every woman tears, or like a large proportion of women tear during childbirth. Really bad tears can tear into the muscle there and require stitches, and so that's a whole thing. So if you're married to someone who's given childbirth, or you have given childbirth, then you probably know what the perineum is. If you haven't, hopefully that story will help you remember where the perineum is. I want to do popliteal. The back of the knee. So you had the patella as the front, popliteal is the back, anterior, posterior. And sural. That's the calf. And I see here, this is like the sole of the foot, right? The sole of the foot. So that was the plantar region. Another view of the plantar region, which we went over in the anterior view. So there's a bunch of body regions. There are more, but this is the best way to study, is just to find an image, an unlabeled image, and just start filling them in. Whichever ones you're required to know. Just start filling in the lines. Oh, see, there's our cubital region, right? Another view of cubital. All right, that's it.